right, Congressman, Admiral, I don't know what to call you.
Joe.
Joe, okay, there you go. That's that folksy politician coming through.
Although
right there.
my favorite title is Dad.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Well, I want to go back before Dad became a title. Let's go way back to the beginning and tell our listeners a little bit about who Joe Sestak is, going back to early childhood.
Well, I grew up in a family of 8 kids, and my father, the greatest man I ever met, was a Navy officer, World War II, and I wanted to be just like him. So 3rd grade, I decided I was going to join the Navy. My mom was a high school math teacher. Catholic family, we all went out the door together, and the last one went out to 1st grade. She went out with him again, teaching high school math. This was during Vietnam, and I went off after graduating from Colonel Harrow High School, and I had 31 wonderful, beautiful years in the Navy, and I loved it.
Tell me a little more about your parents and the upbringing.
I would love to.
Yeah.
My father, immigrant from Czechoslovakia, he was something. My best memory of him is we were out there about 9 years old, and maybe I was 7, I can't quite remember, freezing weather, and the old cars, the batteries always died, and he was out there trying to fix it together, and after about an hour, he said, "You're cold, go ahead in." And I looked out the window for the next 2 hours as I watched him just stay out there, keep working away on it. It was just something, that persistence, determination. My mom, who's still out there just plugging away at home. She comes in and stuffs envelopes in the campaign every day. She's the chief stamp sticker.
There you go. You got to have one of those in every
high school
campaign,
math teacher. Yeah. She had grown up and worked at MIT, actually, after graduating from college. And she actually helped develop the fire control cover that went on destroyers. I can't tell you it's the same my father was on during World War II, but that's what she did. And just wonderful. She's was there. She would get up 3 o'clock in the morning with 8 kids. She would prepare for the classes. She actually went and got her master's in math at Villanova while she was teaching. And we'd wake up, 6:30, whatever it was, and not even know for months that our mom had been up since 3 o'clock waiting for the meal. We'd all go out. We'd come home, and there she was. No one's like her.
You talked about that example of your father and perseverance and watching that. What is perseverance? Is that what you would say is your most dominant trait from your parents, or is there something else?
I think the most dominant one, which kind of goes with it, is the ability to understand that principle really does matter. Whether it's honesty or whether commitment to others, a belief that you can't do better for yourself than by serving others above yourself. But the perseverance of that is important. Let me give you an example, the most important one of my life. I proposed to my wife. 8 years later, she said yes. So I persevered, yes.
Now, how many times in that 8 years did you ask again and again?
Several. I had, the second day I met her, I didn't get married, I was 47. A lot of sea time. Well, okay, I couldn't convince anyone. But the second day I met her, I had proposed. It was actually on a trip.
Wait, you met her?
Second day.
And the second day you said, "Will you marry me?"
I was like 39, and it was we were going to the Soviet Union. 5 officers, and one of the first exchange with the Soviet Union as it was breaking up on Gorbachev, and the civilian Sovietologist was supposed to go with us, an Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine guy, and I was joint staff. And he got sick, and all of a sudden, this beautiful young woman showed up, young Sovietologist. We're in St. Petersburg the second day, and in the night, as we're out there on the water, come back in and proposed. Of course, she's beautiful. She's going with somebody. But perseverance.
Yeah. What do you think finally pushed her over the edge? Was
perseverance?
Just to get you to shut up, probably, about it, right? Yeah.
But, wow, what a woman.
Well, that's a fantastic story right there. You started to go into Navy experience. Let's talk a little bit more about when you decided to join the Navy. What was the driving force that led you to make that decision?
It was my pop, Brad. It was 3rd grade, I remember. I can remember we had gone, we used to go down to Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. Used to love to crawl over the old World War II ships that used to be there through the 50s and 60s, because we always were ready to mobilize them. Yeah. And then 3rd grade, I decided. I can remember talking with him about it. I was going to do it. Never changed. He was something.
The thing is, we all wanted to do things in 3rd grade, but most of us never did them. But you stuck to the
perseverance.
Yeah, there you go.
Vietnam was happening.
Yeah.
One of my best friends was Constable Jector. Still know him. Mike's a great guy. But this was something I wanted to do. And so off I went. I didn't think I was going to stay as long as I did, but I enjoyed every day. So even when I was a congressman or running across this state, I used to say, if you can't be in the Navy, I know I've got the next best job. Loved it.
Yeah. So how many years was it in the Navy?
31.
31. Right?
Yeah. And I got to do some real interesting things. I had the Navy's anti-terrorism unit, as you probably know, and got to be on the ground. Nothing like the Marine Corps and the Army. I had to go in for a short mission to begin the Afghanistan war. Came out short. And commanded carrier battle group in the war. And then I got to serve as President Clinton's Director of Defense Policy, and I learned that while militaries can stop a problem, we can't fix it. And all the elements of power fix it. And you can see that in Iraq today. We didn't quite fix that one. But I so enjoyed it.
All right, one more frivolous question before I move on.
The Navy's not totally frivolous.
Well, I mean, we're having a little fun here.
Nice wife, Susan.
So what's your favorite movie about the Navy?
Oh, that's a great one. I really liked, and I don't know why, I liked the Hunt for Red October. Mm. I just thought, there it is, not just machine, but it's what really makes our military so much better than everyone else's. It was the men on that submarines, but now the men and women rightly, which make us even better. Just the thought process through it. I just almost you felt you could be in their minds. What's he doing now? What's he doing that? That one is probably my favorite.
That's a good one. Good pick. Okay, so the Navy's behind you at this point. You're looking now at continuing public service. Why did you want to continue run or jump into politics and run for public office? Well,
I was an independent. I thought that military officers shouldn't be involved in politics, so much so while I voted. Although in the Persian Gulf, you often got your ballot after the election was over in the old days. Oh, my gosh. And I actually voted for a bill to improve that when I was down there. But I, as I got married, a few years later, had the treasure of my life, our daughter Alex, and, came back from the war. That year, she was born in 2001. So I was gone, working up, and then deployed for about a year, came back, and she was struck with malignant brain cancer. And very rare form, glioblastoma. Only 8% of kids have ever survived. And I remember walking, and when she rolled out from the surgery, the doctor said we couldn't get it. You need a total resection. And the pathologist, I asked him what it was because he had been in there. And he said, it looks like glioblastoma. I said, well, what's that mean? He said, probably got 3 to 9 months. So I did what every father does, walks outside Walter Reed, looks up the sky and says, hey, Lord, how about taking me instead? But Brad, it doesn't work that way.
No, the deal making is a tough thing.
You go back in and we fought like the devil. Got her to Children's. I was stationed at the Pentagon. She's now 14, going on 22.
How's she doing?
She's doing great. I mean, she really is. That saying that children make adults out of parents? She really showed what toughness is and whatever. And, as she said to me one day, as I said, well, honey, am I doing a good job raising you? She said, Daddy, come on, I'm raising you.
There's that 22 coming in.
But that was the decision.
I couldn't help but notice, and our listeners can't see this, but you have kind of a brightly colored bracelet on your arm there. What's the significance of that?
So she made that at 4 years old. Just the day before her brain operation in Walter Reed, we were there in Walter Reed, and we knew something was wrong. We'd been to 3 doctors. We were going to Walt Disney the next day, but she was stumbling a little bit here or there. There was just some things looking, and an ophthalmologist, pediatric one, found an expanded optic nerve. We slammed her into a CT, so to speak, scope, and he said, tumors. Put her up in the ICU room where it was just her and about 20 guys back from Iraq. She thought it was something. She was there with the soldiers. Yeah. But, and it was a Friday. They waited a Monday and to begin the brain operation. She made this the day before. And while there's not a question, the good Lord had a lot to do with it, and wonderful doctors, which is what drove me into politics. That luck has to do with it. And so that bracelet always remains with me on my forum. I never forget when I went on Meet the Press the first time. That was Congressman, and this woman producer, whatever, started pushing it up and covering it with tape. I said, "Oh, that has to be down there." He said, "Well, people will see it." I said, "If my daughter doesn't see it, we have to pay."
Absolutely. Those TV people, they can't. They focus on the dumbest little things, don't they?
But that's how I decided.
So you made it to Congress.
Yep.
And
it was a payback tour.
It was a payback tour.
I had to look. In the military, you, Brad, and everyone else gave us the health care that, while I served the nation, the one time I really needed it, it was there. So I went, it's Republican district, Cape where I was born and raised up, and I threw my hat in the ring, and I ran on national security that begins at home, in health and education security, and we won. Yeah. And I love serving people there, too.
Now, the time that you spent in Congress, everybody that gets elected goes in with big dreams, big ideas. Do you feel like those were years well spent for you?
Without a question. First, I'm most proud of, we kept our district office open 7 days a week, up until about 8 or 9 o'clock every night. We had 50 interns that we rotated onto my staff so they could work near normal hours. And we handled 4 times the constituency cases, 18,000 people, that the average congressional office did. It was wonderful. I mean, it was what we do in the Navy. Your Human Resources office, when one of your sailors had a problem, you can't outsource it. Second, down in Congress, 2 things. One is, there was 19 pieces of legislation that I was able, in a bipartisan way, to pass my first 2 years there. Steny Hoyer, the majority leader, called us the most productive congressman, but we did it in matters that really affect families. The first movement of funding into autism in 12 years. But we did it by canceling 2 Army programs that the Army didn't want, $29 million. Yeah. The Elder Abuse Act, because I had a senior that got beat with a belt buckle, dementia at a living facility, and how do we better protect them? But then there were things. I got down there, and we had this war called a recession, that started just before I got there. We had to plug the hole of the ship. It was sinking. And then the Affordable Care Act, where everyone has an opportunity I have, cutting the interest rates of student loans in half. And yet, some of those political challenges I saw, where the parties were so diverse. I walked into the Republican cloakroom once. I thought I was just going to the chief's mess, like on a ship. Yeah. I'm going in to discuss an issue. And everybody looked up. And I never saw a Republican come in the Democratic side of cloakroom off the floor. And all I could think about is, man, I've been at sea. I've been in the Navy 31 years. I come back, and what's happened to the soul of America? We used to have bitter disagreements, but not be divisive. And I always remembered that, and that's part of the reason I'm running now for U.S. Senate.
Well, it just has gotten to a point where you can't just disagree. From the elected officials, federal, to what we're seeing at the Capitol here in Harrisburg, to what you may see at the dinner table between families. No one can just disagree without getting angry anymore, and it's like we've been hardwired by media or whatever else to feel that way.
But you're absolutely
how
right.
do we roll that back?
We need a different set of leaders, and you don't need a lot. You just need a few titans. I've seen it on a Navy ship. The morale's bad. The crew's broken apart. You walk aboard, and there's only a couple that you need, a couple good chiefs, an executive officer, a captain that sets the tone, who's not above accountability. Because a leader, I believe, given authority and responsibility more than others as a leader, with them both goes accountability. And if something goes wrong with that ship, the crew comes to harm, the ship goes aground, he or she's relieved for cause. That's what the nation needs again, to understand that someone is going to say, here I stand, I can do no other. If it doesn't work, don't judge me on my intentions, my words, what I actually said I would do. Look, those 19 pieces of legislation were done with Republicans. Occupational therapies, we needed more in this nation. I worked it with a Republican because TBI, traumatic brain injury for our vets, they were coming home. We didn't have enough occupational therapists and physical therapists for them. It can be done. My district was Republican. I won it the first time. I spent $3.5 million. My second race, I raised that much. But even though it was 56% Republican, 35% or so Democrat, I won it by 20 points, spending $28,000 on yard signs. Why? The office was open, and we let people come in on Saturday mornings. If you had a disagreement on an issue, you could come in and meet with me. Look, we have to do it. Because otherwise we're not going to be the United States of America, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It only takes a few leaders. It doesn't beat up on Republicans if you're Democrats. You can disagree with their ideas, but you know what? We're all in this together. And that is where people have to remember we are.
This may be difficult to put into words, but you talked about dealing with it in the district by just having people come in and talk. If you're elected to the Senate, you're going to be one of 535 voices down there. How does one be? And it doesn't seem like there are a whole lot of people that want to get along down there right now. How does one voice out of 535 make a difference?
I'm going to do it two ways. First, here in Pennsylvania, quite frankly, we didn't just keep the office open. Every week, I would have a town hall, an open town hall, usually, or I'd have a summit meeting, but it would be open to everyone. I intend, like I walked the 422 miles across this state, like today I had 2 events that were open, Alzheimer's that we announced, and also one on rare diseases, and then I walked to walk in the shoes of Pennsylvanians. They're open. You're going to see me everywhere. You don't see elected officials opening open town halls where everyone is invited, from the Tea Party to the progressives, Number 2, down there, think about the Senate, how it's changed, though. First, I intend to do what I did in the Congress, where I passed those 19 pieces of legislation and issues that are of common concern: autism, seniors, not being abused. Oh, by the way, small businesses and the proper investment in them. But think about this. The Senate has now become a bully puppet where you could be there less than 2 years and almost have a bully puppet equal to the president. Rand Paul, Cruz, Rubio, Senator Obama.
That's right.
I intend to use the ability that I have, first in the military, talking about ISIS or Iran, to help shape the debate, but not in a way that puts the other side down, but lays out why they're in our interest to have an Iranian Accord. And second, to say, as a Navy Admiral, let me now tell you what I think can bring together the 2 great characteristics of our American soul, we the people, rugged individuals. We all want to have the government not only to interfere with our freedoms, but can we have a government that actually advances our freedoms by giving us greater opportunity? I want to present my proposals and legislation in that way, not a I win, you lose way. I think it can be done. It has to be. Or that glacial, frozen Senate isn't going to get anything done. And America then remains in a state of, quite frankly, we're a little bit broken apart right now.
Yeah, we're broken apart, and Washington is practically gridlocked. I mean, even within the Republican Party, they're not getting along with each other. We've seen that recently with the House.
And yet every time, all they do is blame the other side. Wait a minute, you've been elected. Are you willing to be accountable for things not happening? You need to do a principled compromise without compromising your principles, I tell my staff.
I want to get to some issues more specific to Pennsylvania in just a bit, but of course everybody with the recent events is talking about ISIS and the Paris attacks, and I want to get your perspective on that, because yes, we have fought terrorists before. We've had, I don't remember when the war on terror term was coined, but it was quite a while ago. And but we're fighting an enemy that's not an army. They're spread out. It can be individuals. You're a military man. How do you fight that?
We have to have a different strategy than we have today. We are looking at it in an anti-terrorist way. Oh, ISIS is a terrorist organization, but it is more than just that. It is actually controlling territory equivalent to the size of Belgium, a population equivalent to the population of Norway. It has over $2 billion in assets. It's earning from between $600 million to $1 billion every year in revenues from oil fields and other means, ransom and theft, taxes. It actually has. But if we don't look at it as a wannabe, aspiring, dangerous state, then number one, we will have the wrong military targeting, which we have, and two, we will not have the diplomatic skill and leadership to bring together a coalition of the convenience, the coalition of the willing. Here's what I mean. Targeting, it's not just helping on the battlefield the Kurds, for example, to take territory back from ISIS. Go after that infrastructure from which they get their power, their profits, their money, the oil fields, as I said, the government institutions that we have not taken down. Number two, you have to understand that we are going to have to work in a coalition of the willing with Russia and Iran, with principled compromise, like I talked about that we need in the Senate to say, okay, we may not want Assad, a brutal dictator of Syria, to stay around, but guess what? He's not directly threatening us. So Russia, we need you to work with us. We'll let that guy stick around for a while. And same with you, Iran. That's the key. Otherwise, what you're going to be doing is having what's occurred, another 50 special forces. What's the metric for that? And so look at this as a wannabe state, have a balance of power of other states going against it, because there is a unique opportunity here where ISIS is the common threat of many nations.
Who should be the leading force isn't the right word. Who should be the leading voice to try to bring that coalition together? Is that the president? Is that the Secretary of State? Who should be over there?
First and foremost is the president, because his number one constitutional duty is the security of America, and this is a threat to us. Number two, I wish I could say the Senate, but can you name me on either side of the aisle? Who is there that was a titan of old? We used to have the Sam Nunns, the Scoop Jackson, that were titans and could shape the debate. Think about this. We had 47 senators who wrote a letter to the Ayatollah and said, hey, I know you said death to America. How about a little bipartisanship between us, my party and the Ayatollah, against our presidency? Not just the president. They said ignore the presidency of the United States of America in the negotiations for the Iranian agreement. And then on the other side, there's a vote. And that was the Republican side. On the Democratic side, there was a vote for this Iranian Accord, let's say. Mm-hmm. Or they said for a year we want some resolution of war for Syria, but nothing's come about. Okay, so they vote, but who's out there shaping it? Leaders shape things. They just don't vote. And so it's up to the president to do that, because I would say, whether down in Senate or people running across this nation for the Senate, there's a dearth of ability to understand the great nexus between foreign policy and military policy, and that militaries can stop a problem. As I said, we just can't fix it.
One more question, then we'll move off of the international front. But with regards to ISIS, a lot of people, after what happened in Paris, they're scared because they know that this could now happen in any major city in any secure Western country. What's your message to those folks who are acting and reacting out of fear with regards to their opinions on, say, the Syrian refugees, with regards to how we should attack the ISIS problem? What do you want to say to them?
Well, I talked about how we should attack the ISIS problem, and we can do that. Remember, it isn't just military. It's bringing together a coalition where we want them to do the ground confrontation, Iran, Russia, and others, with maybe some special forces here or there. Now, number two, let's take the refugees problem. Look, I headed the Navy's anti-terrorism unit, as I know, and I'm familiar with the vetting process. And I also am always concerned about flows. But we've gotten in close to 800 million refugees already in this country. And there is 800,000, excuse me, thank you. And there is a vetting process that is so thorough, that involves the Homeland Defense, the Intelligence Division of Justice, State and Defense, as well as others, that there's even a classified one that you can't talk about screening process for Syria. It takes up to a year, where they're vetted, they're interviewed, documentation. Yes, we have the ability as our American bureaucracy to ensure that no one is going to slip through that crowd to us. But that said, I do think that Americans have to always remember that after 9/11, we had before that away games. We liked our wars over there. But all of a sudden we had a home game. So understandably they're concerned, and I understand that, and they should be. But keep this in mind, that we have to work with other nations for our security. Remember the statue that's closest to the White House. It's not an American. It's a French general, Rochambeau, because George Washington passed control of our forces to that French general to win our victory at Yorktown, and in honor of an ally assisting us. And those that want to harm us come from over there. So working with other countries, sometimes adversarial to us, like Russia and others, is absolutely critical for the intelligence we need to stop them.
All right, let's come back to the home front. Let's talk about Pennsylvania. If you're the next U.S. Senator for Pennsylvania, what are the issues? What are you going to do? What are you going to fight? What are you going to do for us?
There's two major ones. First is real job growth with wages that increase, and that means a whole focus on small businesses. Look, in the last 40 years, Pennsylvania has had half the growth of small businesses of the nation's average. Small businesses create 70% of all new jobs. If we've had half the growth of small businesses as our nation's average, if you look at the census data, our job growth has been half the national average. So the youth look elsewhere for it. They need two things, and it's in my book, Restore the American Dream, Walking in Your Shoes, Restore the Dream. One, they need access to the mother's milk of a startup, because a startup's the one that really create the new jobs, and that's capital. Wisconsin did it by giving a tax credit for anyone who invested from Wisconsin in a small business, and you had tax credit up to $1 million, 50% of everything you put in up to $1 million. They quadrupled the investors, number one. Number two, it costs 40% more to handle regulation by a small business of less than 20 employees than it does for a company of $500 and more. Remove that regulation, number one, by reinstituting the Negotiated Rulemaking Act, where small business can sit at the table, not done since 1999, and help to make sure when they're developed, these rules by EPA and others, they don't affect small businesses in a draconian one-step way. And number two, so important, our human capital. You know, the education is our homeland defense. In the Navy, you can't be promoted to senior chief petty officer unless you have an associate's college degree. And officers got to have a master's degree. It wasn't like that way when I joined up. I had chief petty officers that didn't even have graduate from high school. But today, education is our homeland defense. And one particular area, if I could point out, yes, pre-K, early childhood, all that, affordable college, but community colleges, such a great starting way. I had those artisans who learned so much for the welding and anything else. Well, guess what? Here in Pennsylvania, where the nation has 62% of its youth in community colleges, we've only got about 28%, because only 5% of our colleges are community colleges. Across the nation, 25%. Look, it's a great, fairly inexpensive starting way. Go to a four-year college after that, another two, whatever. So those are areas I want to focus on, because manufacturing is about to come home from China, since it costs almost as much there to produce today as here, and 98% of all manufacturing is done by small businesses.
You believe that we're going to see that come back, really?
Here's why. In the last 7 years, the wages in China have gone up 15% every year. And as you saw, they just announced a two-baby policy. They had a one-baby policy because they don't have enough labor. Because they're getting so old. You think it's getting so old. Yeah. And the shipping cost. There's only so much shipping because they've been demanding so much. The shipping cost, and I'm very familiar with shipping, has gone out of the roof, and diesel cost it. So I have business associates who have closed down upwards of 6 factories there. They all haven't come here. 4 have come here. Others have gone to Thailand and other places. But that's why, if they're producing 98% of all wind turbines that have 400 tons of metal in them, we need to have the artisans to the community colleges ready to do that, and also the nano fabrication and solar power panels. It's about to come home if we really start up small businesses, because 98%, remember, of all manufacturing companies are small business, and number two, have our youth ready with the skills to take it. It's about, and this is what I would love to work on first and foremost, those two down there.
We only have a couple minutes left in our time here. It goes by so quickly anytime we're in studio. But I want to ask you about one of your major campaign themes, and that is walking in the shoes of insert group here. Tell me about the inspiration for that.
I will, and there was two. In my first race, my daughter, who campaigned with me at 4 years old, she drew a little pair of shoes. Now, they were like 2 round red dots. But she actually wrote, she's precocious, Joe Sestak, walking in your shoes. And I always kept it on my door in Congress. Then she and I were reading the book To Kill a Mockingbird when she was in 8th grade about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. And if you remember in that book, that other precocious young girl, Scout, who's the narrator of the book, walks next door to her, the neighbor who she'd never met and was scared of, who saved her life one night, took him back home. He went inside, never to be seen again. She turned and looked out from the porch. And she looked at the world through his eyes and said those words, and then as a narrator, you can never know a man till you stand in his shoes. and walk around in them. So what I did is I held up the combat boots I wore on the ground in Afghanistan when I kicked off my campaign in March. I said, I'm going to walk 422 miles across the state, and each day I'm going to do a different event for someone else. Another group in Pennsylvania walk in their shoes. That day I did veterans. I went to prison, for example, on Veterans Day, and I walk this Veterans Day to keep up walking after the walk across the state, and then walked to a VFW and did an event on our vets. I go to a prison every year to visit our vets, at Congressman, and even today. Then I slept overnight in a church, African American church. I woke up the next day and did an event on the underserved, the poor. The next day I did human trafficking that goes through Bucks County. I then did small business, women, all the way across this state in the shoes of Pennsylvanians, because I believe the biggest deficit we have in America today is not the national debt. It's the trust deficit. No one trusts rightly Washington, D.C. any longer, of either party. And I told them I'm an independent who happens to be a Democrat. It's not about party. It's not about type. It's about people. I learned that in the Navy. Take care of your sails or take care of the mission and the ship. I wanted to walk in their shoes to let them know, like today, when I walk those 4 or 5 miles from Alzheimer's event, for those that's how our seniors are suffering from it, the 5th most Alzheimer cases in America and Pennsylvania, to sickle cell, which devastating a certain part of our demographic, principally the African American community, that I would walk in your shoes, listen, and when I get to Washington, D.C., hold me accountable for continuing to walk in your shoes. I just want people to know, not that they need to agree with me all the time, but I would agree, because we're Americans, we're a democracy, but that they could trust me, that I'd be accountable for what I finally said. I got it. Here's where I'll stand when I go down there. And I'm willing to lose my job over doing what's right for them. That's why I did the walk.
Have you been keeping track of the miles? How many are you?
We have back.
What are you up to?
I don't know exactly. It's supposedly something like I do 422 across, and supposedly I'm up to something about 460 or 470. I should have gotten that just before I came on.
Right.
I only did 4 today. They're ratcheting back on me a little bit, but that's because we went on television this morning, ISIS, and had a couple other events, and it wasn't time.
That's okay. That's okay.
And people walk with me. I'll never forget 2 things, if I might.
Yeah, sure.
I did that walk across the state, and over 50 people stopped, from an 18-wheeler to a young woman, as I climbed up a mountain, walking up a road on a mountain in Franklin County, and stopped, and they all said, "You need a ride in America." And the second one was, I was going down through Palmyra, and I'm walking along. I just done an event at the Sinkhole Saloon about transportation.
Nice.
Yes, because there's a sinkhole that slips every 2 years because the transportation bill's been stuck in down there in Congress for 4 years. And then I walk along the road, and I went past this car dealership, and this man came out and yelled out at me, "Hey, Admiral Sestak," because I had my green bombardier jacket on. I guess he recognized me. He said, "I'm a Republican, but I love what you're doing."
That's got to be little moments like that.
It makes all the world of difference.
Yeah. All right. Well, Admiral, Congressman Joe.
Dad.
Dad, thank you for being here.
Thanks,
Appreciate
for
it.
having me
All
very
right.
much.